Hey guys, welcome to the Eerie Side Podcast with your host Dee,
Sophia,
and Elena.
We appreciate you guys listening, and I hope you are ready to get on the eerie side. Before we get into the show, we would appreciate if you all can give the podcast a follow and make sure the bell notification is turned on so you'll be notified whenever we drop an episode. If you enjoy the show, we would love to have you leave us a review, and if there's a case suggestion or any feedback you'd like to share, feel free to send us a message in the text box below. Share the podcast with family, friends, co-workers, or really anyone you think will enjoy it. Please follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. So I'm doing a story this week, and I have presented a story of Skidmore, Missouri before with Ken McElroy. I don't know if you guys remember Ken?
I do.
Okay. If you guys do not remember who Ken McElroy is, please go back to that episode and listen to it. I'm doing another one on this little town. In 2001, Skidmore, Missouri has the population that is only 245. And how can such a small town have so many strange incidents? My story is about Branson Perry. Branson Kane Perry was born to Bob and Rebecca Perry on February 24th, 1981, and raised in Skidmore. He graduated from Nottoway Holt High School in 1999. After graduating, he worked at several odd jobs. He worked as a roofer for some time, but lost his job and decided to help with a traveling petting zoo while he looked for another occupation. In 2001, he was 20 years old and lived at 304 West Oak Street in Skidmore with his father because his parents were recently divorced and his mother was not there. Although Branson suffered from tachycardia, which made his heart race, he was quite active and in good health. He had a black belt in Hapkido and enjoyed lifting weights. On April 7, 2001, Branson visited his neighbor Jason Bierman, a man in his 30s, who drugged him by giving him an unidentified drug.
Whoa.
From what he could remember, while intoxicated, Branson danced around Bierman's house nude, shaved all his pubic hair, and then participated in sexual activity with Bierman. Sober and humiliated the next day, Branson explained the situation to his father, who was furious. Bob said he knew his son was homosexual and that he had sex with men in the past. Bob Perry was reportedly enraged at Bierman for drugging, then using his son, and even considered teaching him a lesson. However, no confrontation ever took place. Bob never knew his neighbor was gay and was livid that the older man had taken advantage of his son while the younger man was inebriated.
There is a lot happening in Skidmore, Missouri.
Branson felt upset that Bierman had abused him while he was in a compromised state. On April 11, 2001, Branson invited his friend Jenna Crawford to come over and help him clean the house. The reason for this is his father, Bob Perry, was in the hospital and was due to come home soon. Meanwhile, two mechanics were outside replacing Bob Perry's alternator, which had given out the day before. Out of nowhere, Branson suddenly grabbed something from a cabinet and then went outside. Upon returning, he didn't tell Jenna what he had grabbed or why he left. Jenna took a shower after they finished cleaning and then saw one of the mechanics riffling through a kitchen cabinet. When she asked what he was looking for, He told her that it was nothing and went back outside. Resting upstairs, Jenna looked outside the window at about 3 p.m. She saw Branson leaving the house and called out to him, asking, quote, "Branson, what are you doing?" End quote. Branson replied, quote, "I am going to put away the jumper cables, then run out for a bit. I'll be back in a few minutes." End quote. So Branson walks outside his home to return the jumper cables to the shed adjacent to his house, and then no one sees him. Since Branson's father was still hospitalized for a few days, his grandmother, Joanne Stinnett, dropped by on April 12 to see Bob Perry in the hospital. She asked Bob if Branson had come to visit the night before, and he said that he hadn't. Though it was somewhat alarming since Branson had visited him every night he was in the hospital, she initially shrugged off her worry. But then she dropped by Perry's home, where she found the doors unlocked and open, house deserted, and the radio on and Branson gone. No public account explains why Jenna or the two men may have left the house in that state when they departed on Wednesday, or if it was in that state when they left.
The door was open and the light was on.
The doors were unlocked and open, the house was deserted, and the radio was on. But Branson was not present.
And where is Jenna at this point?
Not at the house. She's gone. It's a few days now. There's nowhere mentioned in any documentation, at least to the public, if the house was left that way or if something happened afterwards.
So maybe perhaps she left when Branson did not come back from the shed.
There's more to this story because it was Jenna and the two mechanics. There's no mention to the public, at least how the house was left or why they would even leave if he didn't come back.
This is definitely a really strange scenario, and it's a strange scene for the grandmother and what I'm assuming eventually the police to have to put back together. And even hearing it for myself, trying to put the pieces of, where's Branson, and knowing that Jenna was there and that there was a crew working on the car there. This whole thing is definitely a disorganized picture to have to put back together and try and figure out what's going on.
I don't think Branson's grandmother knew all this. She just didn't know what was going on. So this is what happens. Branson's grandmother's worried and starts asking around town, but no one has seen him. She found this unusual and called the residents periodically over the next several days, but got no answer. Upon calling Branson's mother, Rebecca Clino, she found that she had not spoken to him either. Now, it's not clear which specific date, on April 13th or 14th of 2001. And this is a side note, and that's the probable date. A house in Quitman, which is close, frequently used to buy drugs, burns down, that Branson was supposedly involved with. Okay?
And meaning that Branson bought drugs from them?
He was involved with it.
That's how they say.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Bob was discharged from the hospital several days later than planned, and after his release, he and Clino filed a missing report on April 17th. There are also some reports that it was on April 16th, so I'm not sure which date exactly, the 17th or the 16th, but one of those 2 days they reported a missing person. Not only was it uncharacteristic of him to be out of touch for so long, but all of his personal belongings were left behind. Foul play was immediately suspected.
I'm glad the police did not waste any time and came to the conclusion that they should investigate it.
Well, it's quite a few days, too, at this point.
True. That's true, unfortunately.
Nottoway County Sheriff Ben Epsey began searching for Branson by combing a 15-mile, which is a 24-kilometer radius perimeter from the Perry's residence. Numerous fields, farms, and abandoned buildings were searched, but the efforts proved fruitless. During a search of the property, police were unable to locate the jumper cables Branson had purportedly left to return in the shed. 2 weeks later, however, They were found just inside the door. Over the following month and a half, over 100 people were interviewed in Branson's disappearance. Jenna, who had been at Branson's home the day of the disappearance, admitted to law enforcement that he had recently been experimenting with marijuana and amphetamines. A family member also informed police that Branson had a bottle of Valium in his possession the day he disappeared. Law enforcement questioned drug acquaintances of Branson in St. Joseph, but all stated that they had not seen him at each past polygraph examinations. Further investigations into the local drug trade was undertaken, but no discernible leads were uncovered despite rumors that Branson owed drug dealers money. Bob initially suspected that his son had left to stay with friends in Kansas City. Because Branson did not have a working car at the time, Bob presumed he may have hitchhiked. No one seemed to know what happened to him.
That's curious. I'm wondering why Bob thought that when all these lights were on and the doors were unlocked and the radio was on.
Also, isn't the police saying that it's suspicious?
The police is saying it's suspicious. However, I do not know why his father felt that way. I don't know if he had done this before or just maybe he was hopeful. That's what he was doing and why he wasn't anywhere near there. Unless his father knew he had a drug situation, maybe he wanted to get away.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
As far as we know regarding Bierman, with Branson's disappearance, Bierman has never been officially named as a prime suspect in the case, and it's unclear how or if he responded to Branson Perry's disappearance. Branson's disappearance received national media coverage and was profiled extensively by journalist and crime writer Diane Fanning in a book concerning Branson's relative Bobby Jo Stinnett, who was 8 months pregnant, murdered, and had her unborn child stolen in 2004. Yes, this also happened in Skidmore, Missouri.
Oh my gosh. So this is Branson's relative?
It is, I think, his cousin, actually.
Wait, so you said they had their unborn child?
Yes, it's another story. Her name is Bobby Jo Stinnett, and she was 8 months pregnant. And there's a whole story behind it, but she was murdered, and they took her unborn child.
Oh my God.
Did they ever find the baby?
Yes.
And so this was his cousin, you said?
Yes, I think it was his cousin.
Wow.
Yeah, the family seems to have had some difficulties. And this happened in 2004. He was in 2001.
It's so tragic.
Branson's aunt, Gail McCurry, told the press that her nephew loved nature and was a compassionate young man. She claims Branson had come to her and confided that he had wanted to get off drugs. She said that he had originally kept that from her. And this is what she said, quote, "I knew about him going camping and all the fun stuff and about his personal life, but I did not know anything about the drug life," end quote. Branson vanished only days before he was set to go to a rehab facility. Branson's aunt promised to never give up searching for Branson. She believes that people are too scared to talk. But then on April 10, 2003, a promising suspect appeared in a rather gruesome way. It all started when a former 59-year-old Presbyterian minister and Boy Scout leader named Jack Wayne Rogers was arrested in Fulton, Missouri for a separate crime that had nothing to do with Branson. After attempting to perform sex reassignment surgery on a trans woman and failing to stop the bleeding in a makeshift gender reassignment surgery at a hotel in Columbia, Jack Wayne Roger was charged with first-degree assault and practicing medicine without a license. But when authorities searched his belongings, they discovered evidence of even more disturbing crimes on his computer.
Who was the person that they found the disturbing crime?
Jack Wayne Rogers.
Jack Wayne Rogers.
Okay. And who is he to Branson?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay.
They caught this guy because he was doing surgery on a trans woman.
Does Jack have any prior medical experience?
No.
That's crazy.
Has he ever done a surgery like this before? Or just out of the blue said I could do it?
No, he has no medical experience or training.
Right.
Now, not only did they find child pornography, they also came across highly distressing online posts under usernames such as Burger Butt.
Ew.
What?
Yes, and some other weird ones.
That was
which
his.
I didn't put here.
That was his username.
Yeah, he had like quite a few usernames. One was this one.
Ew.
These posts describe the rape, torture, and murder of several men. In some cases, Rogers had even talked about cannibalizing several genitals.
Wait. So what was he doing to several genitals? Cannibalizing?
Uh-huh.
He talked
Wow.
about it, it's according to Mom, right?
Yes, that's what they say.
That's disgusting.
This man is vile.
Perhaps most shocking was the post about murdering a blonde male hitchhiking that fit Branson's description and burying him in the Ozarks. When questioned about this, Jack Wayne Rogers claimed the post was a work of fiction and denied ever meeting Branson. But then the police found a turtle claw necklace in Rogers' car, which bore an uncanny resemblance to the one of Branson's necklaces. However, none of this sufficed was hard evidence. In 2004, Jack Wayne Rogers was only convicted of assault, illegal surgery, child pornography, and obscenity. He received a 17-year sentence for assault, 7 years for illegal surgery, and 30 years for child pornography and obscenity, which would run concurrent with the former two charges, total 54 years. At his sentencing, Branson's mother begged for Rogers to reveal his whereabouts, but Rogers denied being involved in the disappearance. His earliest release date is October 30, 2028, and he will be 83 years old. It was never confirmed that he had anything to do with Branson's disappearance. The police are not completely ruling it out, but now the investigation has turned towards Skidmore again. They have received new leads there. Branson's mother said, "I suppose time was a way of unraveling secrets. I believe someone in the area knows what happens to Branson. In my heart, I believe this suspect is responsible. Despite the nightmare I have lived through at his sentencing, I am thankful that someone with that much evil will never walk this street." Branson's mother waited for answers regarding her son, but she was eventually convinced that Rogers was innocent of abducting him. "In my heart, I don't believe this suspect is responsible," she said. As Branson's mother, Rebecca Becky Cleaner, recounted on her website, the circumstances of her son's disappearance remain rather unclear. Tragically, the Perry family has dwindled in the last 2 decades. Branson's father died in 2004. In June 2009, a Holt County prisoner tips off authorities that he knows where Branson is buried. Law enforcement revealed they were completing an excavation on a site in Quitman, Missouri, after receiving an incredible tip that Branson's remains may have been located there. Over a period of 2 days, excavators dug a 23-foot, 7.0 meters deep hole that covered an area of around 20 feet, 6.1 meters, by 40 feet, 12 meters. At that time, another local farmer who resided 1.5 miles away, 2.4 kilometers, east of Quitman, stated that law enforcement has searched his property several years prior, searching for an abandoned well, but the search yielded no results. After 2 days of excavation, the prisoner later recants, in which nothing is found. In 2010, Clino offered a $20,000 reward for information leading to her son's whereabouts. In February of 2011, Clino died after a years-long battle with melanoma. Joanne Stinnett, Branson's grandmother, said at the time of Clino's death, quote, "Around town we searched every oil well, every outside toilet. We searched everywhere that was possible for us to think that something could be there. End quotes. Monica Kaysen, the founder of CUE Center for Missing Persons and a Friends of Clino, stated that she and close friends have promised her that they will continue to look for her son. In her obituary, it was noted that Clino was preceded in death by Branson, and she was buried beside an empty plot for Branson that lists his date of death as April 11, 2001, the same day he disappeared. In 2015, Branson's grandmother, Joanne Stinnett, dies. But in April of 2019, Nottoway County Sheriff Randy Strong tells the St. Joseph News Press that Branson was last seen at a house that burned down, and authorities won't give up solving the case, as justice and closure for the rest of the Branson's family are essential. And this is what he said, quote, "You go back through and you review the reports and see if we've missed anything. The individuals involved continue to be a threat to the community. Second, it's the right thing to do. If it was a family member of mine or yours, you'd want us to work on it much as we could. I think he was with a group of individuals that he knew when he was murdered, and it's pretty simple as that. The sticking point on this, I believe, is that we're dealing with drug culture. They're not willing to give much information, and we don't know where the body is," end quote. Strong and his colleagues would meet with prosecutor's office the second they obtained enough evidence on a suspect. Missouri State Highway Patrol Sergeant Roger Phillips says, quote, "Just because she is not here doesn't mean this train is not going to keep moving. It's about getting to the truth," end quote. On August 14, 2022, Nottoway County Sheriff Randy Strong announced a suspect had been identified, but more evidence was needed, and they only needed Branson's body to make the arrest. In 2024, Nottoway County Sheriff's Office, Missouri State Highway Patrol, FBI, and other agents searched a well in equipment after receiving a credible tip connected to the Branson case. No new evidence was found. The case's first lead investigator was Stephen Wington, who worked on the Nottoway County Sheriff's Office as a sergeant and investigator from 1997 to 2010. He told the Forum 23 years later that we just went talking to people and just looking around. Put out alerts and what have you, put out a missing person thing on him. And we never got any response at all back from that, Wington said. Foul play wasn't necessarily suspected at first. Branson wouldn't have been the first 20-year-old to hitchhike away from a rural home without warning. Quote, "We kept watching the bank account. He had money in the bank account and he never touched it, so it wasn't like he took off. But it was quick and clear that wherever Branson had gone, something had happened," end quotes, Wington said. According to Clino's account on her website, all of Branson's belongings were still at home when the investigators arrived, including his wallet. That is, except for the jumper cables, which police, Clino said, did not find it in the nearby storage shed where Branson had said he was going to bring them. 2 weeks later, however, the cables were found just inside the door of the shed, though it's unclear from Clino's account who found them. By that point, that case had already reached an impasse, and Whittington was sure of one thing. Some foul play was definitely involved, especially when everything just went. It was cold, and nobody was talking, he told the Forum. That included the two men who were working on Bob Perry's vehicle at the time Branson was last seen. According to Whittington, one of them was mechanic Bill Dragoo. Dragoo died in 2021. Quote, "I always felt that Bill knew something about it, but he never would talk or anything," end quote, Whittington said. And this is the first time they mentioned one of the mechanics. During the first year after Branson disappeared, Whittington said he recalled digging up a septic tank in Holt County, an area north of Skidmore, a spot in Quitman, and that he searched as many wells as they could find, following up on leads and even the weakest rumors, just in case they could find something that would put them on the trail to Branson. As time went on, with more than 100 interviews conducted in the 2 months or so after Branson had been reported missing, law enforcement agencies became more and more focused on his connections to the drug scene around Skidmore and Quitman, a small unincorporated area about 6 miles to the south of Skidmore. In particular, they focused on statements from witnesses who reportedly said that the last time Branson was seen wasn't at his home in Skidmore, but later at the house just east of Quitman. And that's the house that burned down.
Okay, that's interesting. Was that the drug house too?
Correct.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'm sure this is all tied to drugs, Whittington said. After more than 2 decades, more serious theories about what happened to Branson Perry involved people he knew through drugs. Quote, I can tell you that there was a lot of people that were involved in the drug community, involved in selling. And there were a whole bunch of them that were all familiar with each other. End quote, said Darren White, a Noaday County Sheriff deputy in 2001 and later sheriff from 2009 to 2017. In rumors and anonymous tips over the years, a certain house situated on a gravel road about a mile east of Quitman that was a popular place to buy drugs kept coming up. In fact, White said that witnesses at the time gave statements to investigators that placed Branson at the house after he had left his home in Skidmore, though White said he was not involved in the investigation itself at the time those statements were received. Instead, he told the forum in an interview that he was a deputy on duty when the house burned down. Although he cautioned that he wasn't sure of the exact sequence of events and neither was Whittington, White said that he was sure that when the house burned down, Branson had not yet been reported missing. To the best of his recollection, he said that the fire took place sometime during the 5 days between the last time Crawford saw Branson at his home on Wednesday and when Branson's family reported him missing on Monday, probably Friday or Saturday night, he said. There was a lot of activity that went out there, White said. But by the time of the fire, they had all abandoned the place, and this was, in retrospect, after Branson went missing, but before he was reported. On that Friday or Saturday night, White said he responded to the fire at the house. By the time that we got the call and got there, there was absolutely nothing left, he said. It had burned to the ground.
Was there any sign of a body in there? I mean, I'm sure if there was, they would have seen it. So I'm guessing not.
I don't think there was a sign of anybody in there, but I think it had burned so much.
And when did this house burn down in relation to when Branson went missing?
He went missing on April 11th is the last time they saw him. And either April 13th or 14th, the house burns down.
Wow. That could potentially see something.
I guess he could have been alive that whole time and then someone had taken them or something and then burned the house down.
But they didn't find a body.
Oh, yeah. That is, if they didn't find a body, unless they went back and took it, I don't know.
Then maybe they were just destroying evidence.
Yeah, maybe he was killed in there, but they moved his body and just destroying the evidence.
I don't know, but I can tell you what White said, okay? White said that it's most likely the answer to what happened to Branson with the house burning. And he said, quote, the best theory is that he was murdered in the house, that ultimately, of course, when the house was destroyed by fire and possibly evidence that might have been there would have been destroyed in the fire, end quotes, White said. The house was featured prominently in rumors over the years as well, and in April of 2019, Norway County Sheriff Randy Strong told the St. Joseph News Press that Branson was last seen on April 11, 2001, at a residence that burned down only days later. Strong also confirmed to the forum that he was referring to a house in Quitman based on evidence gathered before he had become sheriff. He said he did not want to share more for fear of putting someone in danger due to the specificity of the information.
It's definitely strange that this house burned down. But what's also strange is that the people who were at the house the last time he was at his own house, Jenna and the workers working on the car, don't really say much about how they left the house and how they left Branson, which is also weird and confusing.
Correct. It just sounds very strange. Now, unless something happened and they were afraid for their lives because they
Right.
weren't talking, or they were also involved in drugs.
Yeah, I was kind of confused how they don't remember what the house looked like when they left. They could say, like, if it looked, I don't know, neat, dirty, whatever. Like, they can at least say something, which makes me think maybe they're afraid or they're hiding something like that.
It is possible. Either they all had drugs and then heard what happened to them and they didn't want to get involved. Even if they're friends. It is a small town. They all know each other. And if it involved drugs and they killed him, then they're afraid to talk.
But why would they kill Branson?
Well, maybe he owed them money, couldn't pay him, or something happened.
Or maybe, like, he had an accidental OD. Not saying that the friends were the ones that were there, but I'm just saying that whoever was there with Branson, they could have tried something new and maybe it was laced or whatever, and he OD'd and they're afraid that they were going to get charged.
So they took him from his house and then brought him to the drug house?
He might not have been in the house.
He was, remember? Because all the lights were on.
He left.
He
According
left.
to Jenna, he left.
That's what I was saying. He could have gone to the drug house and that's where it happened.
But that, to me, that still doesn't answer the question as why the house was in the condition it was when his grandma visited.
True, unless they're going to find something that maybe could trace him back to them. I don't know.
I have no idea. It looks like someone may have gone in for some reason. I don't understand. If Jenna was the last one out, why didn't she turn off the radio? She never said the radio was on, ever.
It's just strange. I don't think he went hitchhiking. He was visiting his father every single day in the hospital, and I don't think he would just abruptly stop and not say anything to his dad.
Agreed.
I really do think something happened in Quitman.
Right.
Now, maybe he did OD, or maybe he went to get drugs and they got into some fight and they killed him accidentally or on purpose. I have no idea. And
Yeah.
then it could be they got afraid, left the house, noticed no one was coming looking for him, and burned it later.
Also, like, whenever there's drugs involved, there's almost always guns involved too. He could have gone to get, like, some drugs and witnessed something that he wasn't meant to see, and they had to silence him, basically.
It could be anything, that's for sure. But something did happen in that home, I think, because that home did burn down a few days later.
Yeah. Did the fire department ever say, like, if it was an accidental burning or intentional?
I think they think it was an intentional one.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Even if the investigators believe that Branson was last seen at the house, that doesn't solve the crime. White caution. In the more than 2 decades that the case has been open, law enforcement officials have followed hundreds of leads that have all so far failed to lead to finding Branson. Without that, there has never been enough to warrant an arrest. White said, quote, "There was just a lot of little pieces of information, but not enough to put everything together," end quote. Branson's disappearance has received coverage in a July 17, 2010 episode of the Fox television program America's Most Wanted, and in the Sundance Channel series No One Saw a Thing in 2019. The Nottoway County Sheriff asks anyone with information about the Branson Perry case to contact them at 660-582-7451.
But it's definitely a very interesting and perplexing case, I would say.
If it's such a small town, I know people can't make accusations, but I'm sure they're thinking, "Oh, it's probably so-and-so," or "I heard so-and-so's involved."
I also think that the sheriff has a good idea who it may be, but like he said, if he needs a body, he's never going to find one unless they killed him and moved him. But if they burned him, they're never going to find a body.
You can find bodies if they've been burned.
But they didn't find anything. No one ever said the house burned down and they went in there and found anything. I'm not even sure if the fire department was ever called.
So you think maybe the fire department never even examined the house?
Correct.
Whoa, that's interesting.
But still, like, eventually someone had to walk through it and they would have seen the body. I mean, it wasn't hot enough to cremate it. House fires can't get hot enough.
Exactly. I think the temperatures need to be insurmountable compared to a house fire.
So maybe they just destroyed some evidence then that it was there, and then maybe he is buried. Because the police still thinks they're going to find a body because they said that's the only evidence. So maybe they know something that we don't.
It's possible.
They're not saying everything. You know, they never do.
I could definitely see this one being solved in the future.
If someone talks.
Right.
Because there's no DNA. There's no evidence at that home.
Unless a body gets discovered at some point by accident, you never know.
That's true. So, and the other thing is the police seems to be digging up places and looking at wells. So maybe there's something going on there. Or maybe they're aware of something. Anyways, it's just so strange for me to have so many things happening at Skidmore, Missouri.
Yeah, for such a small town, it's very interesting.
I agree. But, you know, small or big, it's interesting how drugs got there too.
Yeah, I wouldn't think 245 people is enough for there to be a drug house. Now, I'm assuming they probably sold drugs to the nearby cities as well, though.
Well, the drug house wasn't at Skidmore. It was Equipment, which is also small.
Oh, okay.
But you do have young people.
And also people you would not even expect are doing drugs, too.
True. Actually.
Plus, didn't they have, like, lesser, like, not as hardcore drugs? You mentioned, like, marijuana.
Well, that's the only thing they've mentioned to us in the articles. I really don't know what he was doing, but he was going to go to rehab, which is not for marijuana.
I know you mentioned that Branson had smoked weed, so I'm assuming that these people are also dealing weed as well. And there's probably a huge market, even in that small town, for at least that drug. And it probably doesn't help that it's like a boring old small town.
I would say there's a market for the bigger drugs, too, in
agreed.
that small town. I don't think it's just marijuana.
No, but
It also could be that his family don't want to admit it or talk about it. That it's okay to talk about marijuana, but not the other stuff. Now, in some states, marijuana is also legal, so maybe they don't feel like a big deal to talk about it. I think there's more there to the drugs than maybe even his family knows or the police want to say.
I definitely think and I hope that the police have more information that they're just not sharing so that they can eventually use that to solve this case one day. Branson's parents, they're both dead now?
Correct.
Okay. I'm looking at photos of Branson. He just seems like a really sweet, nice person. He seems like somebody who, if you were bored and you were sitting in class next to, you'd have a good conversation with.
he does seem really sweet. His mom looks sweet too.
He definitely had his problems because he was with the drugs, but, you know, he would go see his dad. He was taking care of the house. He was cleaning it, so he did care that his dad came back to a clean house. So it wasn't like he didn't care. I just think that somehow he got in over his head more than he thought he was.
And he seemed like a really great son. Like, he seemed like he was open with his parents and he was visiting his dad every single day in the hospital. He was taking care of the house and he's 20 years old. I mean, there's a lot of kids at that age who wouldn't be able to and wouldn't even want to do that. So he just seems like a really mature, responsible, great young man. So it's really sad that his life was most likely, in my opinion, taken way too soon.
Unfortunately, when you get involved with drugs, a lot of things happen.
Yeah, sometimes I think in ways unexpected. I think sometimes people think it's just going to be about the drugs, and unfortunately, there can be really bad characters involved with that scene.
I want to thank you for listening to us this week. We love our listeners, and because of you, we do this podcast. Your help and engagement really helps the podcast grow. If you enjoyed this episode, please text a friend and family member to listen to our podcast. Until next time, make sure you stay on the eerie side. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Be safe.